Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Blue Horizon seminar. My name is He Yuan. I'm the research fellow for the UNESCO Chair in Ocean Governance. So after a fascinating session we had on women in aquaculture back in July, now we move on to the next topic, which is women in extreme environments. So I will now hand the floor to the Director of the Center for Blue Governance, UNESCO Chair in Ocean Governance, and of course our chair today, Professor Pierre Fayet. Have a great time. There you go, Pierre.
Yeah, thank you. So I will be brief and in order to let Faye, to have time to run a presentation. So I think the topic is very interesting because we have done over the years, quite a lot of work. We are still doing quite a lot of work in difficult environments. I'm not talking about the one, in the Caribbean, and I think Faye will give some example, but taking the one mainly in Mauritania, where you don't have any water, you don't have any electricity, it's very difficult to work. Because of this, I think we have developed, and I think a better spirit, in term for the team, and I think that's one important thing. And I think even if there are many challenges, and I think Faye will present that, I think to work in a very difficult, harsh environment, give you more confidence to work in almost everywhere after. So I think that's the positive things. I think Faye will show that, so don't look too much about the Caribbean easy life, but try to focus on the difficulty that she faced and she's still facing when she's doing her research. So Faye, I don't want to present you because I saw, all your positions is quite impressive, to be honest. So I will let you, running your presentation. Thank you, Faye, for being there, and thanks everybody, for joining us today, and thanks her for organizing this Blue Horizon series, which is a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre and He. Yes, so I'm hoping that my talk today will be it will start on a high and all the wonderful things about what we do. It will then talk about the lows and some of the difficulties, particularly that women face in that workforce, but I hope to end us on a high again afterwards. So I'm just going to select the screen here, and can somebody tell me if that is sharing okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm Professor Faye Colfedo. I work here at the University of Portsmouth. And I'm giving a talk today, Navigating Environmental Frontiers, the Role of Women in Extreme Environment. So I'm going to go straight in and talk about why I do what I think is the best job in the world. So this is the high point. I have always wanted to work both in the field and in a lab, and working in the environment has allowed me to do both of these things. I'm a professor in environmental pollution, and that although I started predominantly in the marine environment, I now work both in terrestrial and airborne environments too, which means I really get to do a little bit of everything all over the world. It sounds somewhat grandiose, but I got into this field because I wanted to save the planet, not on my own. I didn't think, I didn't think I was going to do it by myself, but I really wanted to have my work mean something, and for it to be part of the solution going forward. And I like to think that everybody here and everybody who's involved in environmental sciences is very much of the same mind. We do have a reason for what we're doing, and it's an important one. So a couple of examples of maybe some of the places that I have worked. The North Sea. So I noticed that there is somebody who is from CFAS on this today. So hello. I've done quite a few stints out in the North Sea on the CFAS endeavour. And people from the UK may be thinking, well, is that an extreme environment? It is during a force 10, which I've been out in. What I think is extreme is not necessarily an extreme temperature or even extreme rainfall, extreme dryness. It's the type of fieldwork where you are in an extreme situation would also classify. So once you're on ship, you have limited movement and there are limited numbers of people that you can interact with. It encourages a certain mentality, and that can be a very, very good thing for a team dynamics, or that can go quite horribly wrong depending on how the team works together. I have to say my time on CFAS was absolutely excellent. Went at various times of the year. You can see some beautiful sunrises and sunsets here. But the work is tough. It's hard physical work, getting things over the side of the ship, getting them back in. You might see some beautiful sights like the dolphins that like to come along and play in the bow wave. But as I said, the North Sea is known for some pretty harsh and unpredictable weather. The worst storm we faced was actually in one of the August cruises, and I did have a student with me on that on that cruise, and I did lose him for about 3 to 4 days to seasickness into his cabinet. So it is something that I would consider an extreme environment. Any kind of oceanographic work, I think, would be considered in an extreme environment. But it's not just oceanographic work. So although I was looking here, this is in Ghana, I was investigating the impacts of climate change and anthropogenic pollution on coastal lagoons in Africa. And this was a different kind of extreme environment where it was extremely polluted. So it was a very different way of looking at it. We were on mainland Africa. We had access, we could get to Accra within a few hours driving. But the places that we were having to go into to collect samples and work were difficult because of the amount of pollution that was there. And also, when you're doing lab work, sometimes your lab can be in some quite interesting places when you are working in these situations. So again, anyone who's done this kind of field work, the back of a pickup truck is my lab in this case, as you can see. And again, it fosters a certain sense of, as Pierre mentioned, of independence, of that you have really achieved something when you do work in these areas. I'm sticking predominantly with the marine theme for this talk, but this was in the Caribbean. So yes, there was certainly a lovely way of life. This is only one of the Caribbean pieces of work that I've done. This was in Dominica. So as you may know, Dominica has 9 active volcanoes on it. And I was looking at the coastal geomorphology, geochemistry and biodiversity around the volcanoes as they enter the water. They were trying to work out why there were changes in the biodiversity on different parts of the island. And we were looking into the chemistry of the hydrothermal vents. And so in terms of the extreme environments, yes, I was scuba diving off the side of volcanoes, which makes it sound far more extreme than it actually was. It was very, very safe in that sense, but it's also particularly hard work physically doing all of this. And when you're in the water, hopefully this is playing for you. You can see there are bubbles coming up from the hydrothermal vents. So we obviously had to be quite careful. Once we got the data back, we realized there was arsenic in the samples and in the sediments, and that posed danger to both the biodiversity but also the people who were scuba diving around there. Most recently, I've been in Antarctica. This is not, I was not doing a land-based, sort of skiing or camping on Antarctica. I was on HMS Protector, which is a Royal Naval ship here. It's the only UK Royal Navy icebreaker. I was very fortunate to secure a berth on there, and we went down to the Antarctic Peninsula. I was looking at pollution from cruise tourism in Antarctica. This is a very different kind of extreme environment to some of the others that I've been in. Although I was on a ship, it was very different to the North Sea. It was actually much calmer once we got past the Drake's Passage. Around the peninsula was actually pretty calm in comparison to a lot of my time in the North Sea. But obviously it was quite cold. And again, we had, it was a very different dynamic working on a ship down there. So that's a little bit about me and the sorts of things that I do. The sorts of expeditions I've been on and the sorts that I continue to go on. And I guess what I'm here to talk about is why are we speaking about women in these environments? For the ones I've spoken about in Ghana and Dominica, I was the only female in our expedition group. When I was on CFAS Endeavour and on HMS Protector, it was a mixed gender groups because it was a much larger cohort across the ships, but certainly women were in the minority in both of those cases. Does that matter? Well, according to the research, it really, really does. Diversity improves science. It shows, we can see here, gender diverse teams produce more novel and higher impact scientific ideas. Gender diversity leads to better science. So although there was a while where we thought we may have cracked it, the worry was that we weren't getting enough people, we weren't getting enough women doing the degrees in STEM subjects, but that has changed. For example, this from UNESCO's own Institute for Statistics, women accounted for 53% of graduates of the bachelor's level, 53% at master's level, 43% at doctoral level, but are only accounting for 28% of researchers. So half of those graduates seem to have been disappearing. And when we look at where they are, women are predominantly represented within the STEM community at the lowest salaried levels and at the most insecure levels. So you can see here, we have a graph from the World Economic Forum, the global gender gap. So despite 53% of graduates being female, once you enter the workforce, there's only 30% there. The same when it comes to the senior employee, senior level, so, you know, not entry level, but then you move across, once you start getting to the vice president and chief executive, the numbers really, really drop off. So this assumption that we would overcome the issues in STEM just by having enough women doing those degrees is not the case. There is still a real issue with progression through the STEM subjects. And if you see this is probably one of the most depressing graphs I will show you. This is members of national science academies by gender. So these are from all over the world. You know, you see Mexico, Canada, USA, UK. These are the number of people, the percentage of people within these national science academies, like the Royal Society, that would be one I'm a member of in the UK. And you can see that, you know, we're hovering around the 10 to 15% are female in many of these cases. So there's plenty of women coming in at the science level, at undergraduate level, but then not many are continuing on into work. And then when they get into work, those numbers are dropping off. We're worried about that because of the fact that we know that these gender diverse groups actually produce better science. So what could be happening? Now, I'm not going to pretend I know the answer for everything, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experiences here, and that may have some bearing on where some of these women have gone. So, as I said, I just realized that might be in the way. Sorry. Move that out of the way. There you go. As I said, environmental science is awesome. I love it. It's the best job in the world, but it is not without its problems. I'm going to talk about some of the issues here. They are not the sole purview of women. Absolutely not. There are plenty of men who also, and other genders, any gender, who suffer with these issues, but women are disproportionately impacted by these. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour through societal norms, the issues of fieldwork timings and durations, equipment and safety, specifically looking for extreme environments when I start talking about the timings and the equipment. So if you're a woman, sometimes it's not about getting you know, the issues you find in fieldwork. It's actually getting on to the fieldwork in the first place. So these are all quotes that have been directly said to me. The first one being, "You are not allowed to get pregnant during this postdoc." That was one of the first things a PI, a male PI on one of my first postdocs said to me. Weirdly, I considered this quite normal at the time. I just, you know, it was a while ago. But there hasn't been a huge change. There has been perhaps an acknowledgement in certain groups that you shouldn't be speaking like that, but it is something people are thinking about before they even employ onto things. So if you have a group of people on the employment panel who will consider this as an issue, there will be less women who get who make it onto the employment ladder. But in case anyone's thinking that this is just me talking about issues with guys, that is not the case at all, because the next two quotes have come from women to me. I have had various different versions of "why have kids if you're not going to raise them yourself" said to me over the years. I have two kids myself. I have two children. And this started from pretty much the moment I had my first child and I had said that I was going back to work. I can't explain quite how impactful these kind of consistent and continuously having to justify your existence and why you have chosen to do something it's very painful, it's very tiring. And again, I can imagine that some people start to question the validity of their choices to continue in science if you're hearing these sorts of things asked over and over again. And like I say, I have actually never been asked that by a man. I've only ever been asked that, like I say, repeatedly by women. And so it's a societal thing. It's not a gender-based problem. It is a societal-wide problem looking at this. I think probably one of the things that depressed me the most was my trip to Ghana. It was 2 years after I'd had my first child. And I went to the pharmacy to collect my malaria tablets. And I had my 2-year-old with me as I went there. And when I collected them, the pharmacist or the pharmacist assistant looked at me and said, "Where are you going?" Because I was only collecting tablets for myself. I said I was off for field work to Ghana. And her response was, "Well, who will look after the children while you are away?" I am very lucky. I have a very proactive partner, and he is very involved. We co-parent, you know, we do equal amounts in the parenting. And I found that really upsetting, not just for me, but also for him. If we are going to call for equal parenting as women, we're going to ask for that from people. We have to get rid of the notion that women are the only ones who can look after children, or that we are inherently better at it, because that is, I think, unfair on our male colleagues and partners. And also it is preventing us from achieving what we need to when we go into the workforce. So these societal norms are barriers for women going forwards. And as I say, it's not just guys, this is across the whole of society. Once you have children, of course, the schools can become an issue. I've always had, you know, great relationship with the schools where my kids go. It's just expected that the mum is in charge, and I will always be the first person called if there is an issue. I don't have a problem with that. You know, somebody has to be there. And when I called up to say to them, I will be going away for a couple of months, you need to change this so that, you know, the default will be their father. They were very accommodating. But again, I've never heard of a man that's had to think about that and go through that system. It's only women who have had to call up and ask them to change. So it's just these societal norms and the understanding that this is the way it always has been and it always will be. also it's the timings and duration. So specifically when we're talking about extreme environments, and when you're talking about academic fieldwork, once you're out of a postdoc, academic fieldwork tends to happen in school holidays, as that's when there's less teaching at the university. So immediately that excludes anybody with parental or caring concerns, and that can be male or female, that you're excluding immediately there. But there is, again, an overwhelming abundance that the caring responsibilities are on women, and so therefore it becomes slightly more problematic. Some of the quotes people have said to me is, oh, I couldn't do anything longer than a week away from the kids, and I wouldn't leave my kids for that long over Christmas. It seems selfish. Extreme environments take a long time to get to. If you're going somewhere like Antarctica, you have very limited times when the ice is melted enough that you can get in there, and that might be during Christmas, as it was for me last year. That these are things that you have to decide whether you are going to do. So that there will be plenty of people, men and women, who decide not to do field work during those times. But if you want to work in extreme environments, this is something that you will have to consider. Like I say, it takes a long time to get there, and it's very expensive. You're not going to go for a few days. You're going to go for a prolonged period of time. My husband, he also does field work. He's not in academia, but he does field work. He rarely goes away for longer than a week. But he does go away regularly, and he's never asked or told any of the same things that I get called out on for as being a woman who's going away. So I guess what I think is a woman's working practice has become a commentary on her parental abilities or on her parenting. Whereas for a man, your working practice and your parental responsibilities are completely separate. They are considered as different things. They are different parts and compartments of your life. Whereas for a woman, they are considered one and the same, and one must therefore directly impact on the other. And this is, again, a societal issue, the way that we treat men and women differently. Finally, I guess one thing, if you go away and you are, like I say, the person on the school list, and you are the person who picks them up from places, the logistics and prep that you have to go through before you're ready to leave is long and hard, and much higher than it is for often a man in the same situation, whether they have children or not. Often somebody would, a man will say in a traditional family, I'm off somewhere, and then, they're gone. Whereas if a woman says it, there's a huge amount of prep and logistics about how to change childcare arrangements, who's going to do what, pre-cooking lots of things and getting them into the oven so everybody eats well while you're away. These are all things that can impact on whether a woman decides to go into the field and to do work in extreme environments. That's been very heavy on the child side of things, but there are plenty of women who do not have children. They also have many issues. Even if you don't have kids, if you're a young woman, you're often asked about parental consent, which again, I have never heard any of my male students being asked, but I have heard my female students often asked, what does your husband or your family think of that? And it's just not something that gets asked to the guys. So on to more practicalities about some of the difficulties in extreme environments. One of the most embarrassing things, and it doesn't even honestly have to be an extreme environment, just any environmental work, is toileting. So people don't like to talk about it. They're very embarrassed about it. And a huge number of people have, face a lot of embarrassment and even harassment around the fact that they have a different toileting requirements to what would be considered the norm in that situation. And this could be on land or on sea. So for example, on land, if you were in Antarctica, you have to pack out all of your waste. Whereas if you are on a ship, if you are on a, particularly say a dive boat, and you're going out for day-long dives, you have to toilet a lot of the time over the side or in a bucket, which leaves you extremely vulnerable position if you are surrounded by men. And there's a lot of taboo about talking about that and this embarrassment. And the people who are already marginalized, like women and members of the LGBTQ plus community, are the ones who most often have issues here. An example is a quote from a female undergraduate. She was out in the field. She didn't know whether it was legal to pee outdoors, and because she was too embarrassed to talk about it, she didn't drink. So she then became very severely dehydrated and ended up with urinary tract infection. That is surprisingly common across the extreme environments. And it's not a good thing to become dehydrated in any of these environments. It's really important to drink well. So things like stand to pee equipment has now become quite a standard piece of equipment for a lot of women. This can aid with the embarrassment. Very rarely can you do field work in skirts and dresses, so you need to wear trousers, which involves pulling them down if you're going to a toilet traditionally. So either having some kind of screen or having one of these devices makes it that more comfortable in a lot of ways. But it is probably one of the most regular parts of a field trip or an expedition where a woman is likely to get comments and have some kind of issue around the toileting side of things. If that isn't enough, if you are menstruating, often if you're away for longer than a month, it's likely you will at least once or twice have your menstrual cycle. And this is almost never covered. This is a particularly, the quote here is from Antarctica, but this is the same everywhere. Menstruation is rarely discussed in field manuals because the typical expeditioner is assumed to have a non-menstruating body. If you have to pack everything out, or if you need to clean things, you may need extra water to do that. If you have a menstrual cup that you need to clean out. But also for self-care, you may require more water than they think that you should have. And it needs to be something that is discussed beforehand and people made aware of. We've only got a few more of the negative, and then I'm hoping I'll come back to the positive. But I'm not sure how many times I've been told I can't do that. There is a burden of proof on females to prove that they are capable of doing the same work that it is assumed a man can do. In some cases, that may be physical, something related to the physical side of things. But the assumption that somebody can't do something without any discussion is highly discriminatory, whether that be male or female. There is it's an older paper now, but if you look even just in peer review, just in science as a whole, it is averaged that a female would need to do 2.5 times more standard research and produce 2.5 times more outputs to be rated the same as a man. So 2.5 times more just to be rated the same as. And in field work, that's probably even higher. You really need to prove yourself to be given those justifications. So you often you won't even be given the options. It will just be done without you. You won't be included in the conversation, and that will be I just assumed you wouldn't want to, or can you even do that? Again, if you remember earlier on, I showed you the graphic around the fact that predominantly women are in the lower positions of authority, which makes it even harder to then to push back on some of these assumptions. Oh, sorry, I just closed that off. And I mean, when I was on HMS Protector, for example, I was in a unique position in that they had just had a female captain for the last 2 years. And when they saw a senior female academic, it didn't surprise any of them. I am almost constantly told that I do not look like a professor. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks a professor should look like. But the fact that there's assumptions associated with that worries me. But when I was on HMS Protector, I didn't have that said to me once, which was really refreshing. And because there was already a female expedition lead, if you like, the captain was female, and it was not strange to see a woman in a position of authority in the field. And I think we really, really need more female expedition leads. It's not just about getting women out into the field, it's about them leading in the field as well, to provide that safe and environment for both women and men. And when you do go out, if you are out, men tend to be assumed that men are in charge. And even if you're in a group, external people will come up and they will assume the man with you is the person in charge rather than yourself. And I have a little anecdote here about, do you have an elephant? Now, this is weird because this was about scuba diving. So I happened to be in Ireland. I was in Donegal in the north of the Republic of Ireland. And I'd gone all the way out to the west coast to St. John's Point. And I was with two colleagues, and they were both dive instructors, and I was doing my advanced diver course, and I had to lead the dive, and they were assessing me while I was there. So whilst we got there, one of the first things we do, obviously, we keep an eye, very, very close eye on the weather when you're thinking about expeditions and going diving. And one of the best groups of people to speak to are the fishermen. They have local knowledge of the waters. They are also keeping an eye on the weather. So it's always useful to have a chat with them. So I went to have a chat. And once they realized that it was 3 women, they became seriously concerned. They assumed that we didn't know what we were doing. And we had been there a couple of months before and had a mixed group of men and women with us. And it hadn't been an issue because it was assumed that the men would, I guess, look after us. But when it turned very bizarre was when the fisherman said, well, do you at least have your elephants? And we all looked at each other and we said, excuse me, what do we need an elephant for? And, we're going diving. And then they got really, they were like, well, oh, you don't even know what an elephant is. So this is what this diagram is. What we know as a surface marker buoy, which is a long inflatable tube that you put up so that people can see that there are divers down, and boats can come and find you if you're diving off a boat, so they can see where you are. The fishermen were calling elephants, I guess, because they look like a trunk. But by this point, they were very close to calling the harbour master to make it so that we couldn't go diving, purely because we were a group of women. So these are the sorts of things you might have to fight against and deal with if you're a woman, and particularly if you're a woman-only group, and you're going into these sorts of environments. So the equipment is another issue. It can be an issue. It doesn't have to be. It really depends on whether it's your own equipment or whether this is pooled equipment for the group. But in many of the pooled equipment areas, there is this one size fits all, or at least 3 sizes, small, medium, large, fits all. But the small, medium, and large are always men's small, medium, and larges. Equipment is very rarely designed with a woman's body in mind. This is a very attractive. This was my first step onto Antarctica, land in Antarctica, and I don't know if you can see these boots. These were size 10 or size 11 boots. These are attached to the immersion suit. So obviously, if you fall in the water, no water gets in, and it can save your life. So we absolutely required them. I have size 4 feet. And many of the women on the ship did. So my foot came to about just over halfway along this, and it was like a clown walking along. It is part of the assumption that it will be men that will be going on these expeditions, and everything is tailored around them. So unless you have your own gear, do be prepared that you may need to adapt some of the gear as best you can to fit your body. This was a relatively funny thing. It was just something that we used when we got across on the boat. So it wasn't something I was particularly worried about. It wasn't something that really had a risk of injury. But there are other pieces of equipment that may do that, because they don't fit correctly, are unsafe. And that must be addressed properly when looking at risk assessments. If you're doing diving, and particularly a lot of water work, you may end up being in a wetsuit. So the opposite of the dry suit that I'm in this image. As you saw, I was doing a lot of diving. You may do a lot of things in wetsuits, and there becomes an issue possibly around body image for women. This can also, again, affect men, but it's predominantly women, and it's not about size, and it's not about what I think I look like. It's often about being objectified by men when you're wearing tight clothing such as a wetsuit. So conversations about the size of any of my body parts is not really an acceptable thing, but is something that I am almost certain to hear if I'm going out on some of these expeditions. Over the years, this has become somewhat better, but I think that's mostly due to the fact that I have become more senior and people are less likely to say those things to me. For female colleagues of mine who are in junior positions, they still get quite a lot of this, where it is considered appropriate or acceptable, certainly, to discuss the size of different parts of their body because they're wearing a wetsuit, which is a requirement to do the work. And that can be extremely demoralizing for many women. Something that's talked about even less than period problems is, of course, the menopause. Once you become a slightly older female researcher, if you are going through the menopause, sometimes things like these pieces of equipment, if you're having a hot flush, can become extremely difficult. And ensuring that the team knows about that and knows what you're doing, and if you need to take a break, you have to be very vulnerable and open up to men about the fact that you are going through these changes with your body, and that can be extremely difficult for women to do. So again, many women will decide not to, which is a real shame. And I will finish the negatives on probably the biggest problem that women face in field work. These are some of the reports that have come out. These are not old reports. These were 2021, 2024. So know before you go. A community-derived approach to planning for and preventing sexual harassment at oceanographic field sites. In this report, 78% of females have experienced sexual harassment in their workplaces or learning environments, with fieldwork representing the most common location for such experiences. For the NSF, their polar programs, they had a response because there was a real problem there. 95% of women interviewed in focus groups knew of someone who had experienced assault or harassment or had experienced it themselves. A different polar survey showed that 79% of female scientists have very negative experiences during polar fieldwork, and predominantly that came down to harassment, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and issues in fieldwork where in the teamwork dynamic. So this is a slightly older thing, but unfortunately it hasn't changed. Sexual harassment is not only common in scientific fieldwork, but it disproportionately affects women trainees, the undergraduate and graduate students. It not only pushes women out of science, but it leaves emotional scars. So why are some women who are doing STEM subjects not continuing? I can't say that for all of the STEM subjects, but I can say for subjects where fieldwork is a priority. I've just given you a pretty long list of things that a woman has to overcome or has to worry about overcoming just before they even decide to set foot on a plane and go somewhere. But to bring us back up, I would like to say, despite all of this, we know that diversity improves science. We've already discussed that, and it is absolutely vital that women continue to work in these environments. The opportunities are not only amazing, they're inspiring, and there should be equitable access. It makes no sense to say we want women to stay in science, but we don't want them in the field. That's not appropriate, and it's not fair. So a continued and sustained approach to providing opportunity is essential in improving gender diversity in the fieldwork, and therefore in many sciences. I just want to say, every man, woman, and child is needed in our call to improve the planet. The dangers of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are real, and they are immediate. Limiting our scientific resources by exclusionary practices is simply unacceptable, and it's dangerous. Many women go into environmental science for exactly the same reason I did, which is to save the planet. We need to respect these women enough to allow them to do just that. And why are we doing that? I'm hoping we'll just spend 30 seconds, if this video works, looking at what it is that we're trying to save. Oh, it's going a bit slow, I can see, but this is a video I took off HMS Protector in Antarctica, and as you can see, the humpbacks were out in force. This is what we're working towards, and suggesting that only half of the population should have access is somewhat unfair. So that's my talk. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Faye. But they're very, very inspiring, and also, you know, from quite a lot of concern.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you know, I'm very lucky to not be a woman, because I will have to work 2.5 times, you know, more than I do. So I don't see where I can put that, to be honest. So that's thanks a lot, you know, very, very interesting, and very good, because it is many things that we don't even think of. I mean, not, yeah, me as a man, but of course, but we don't realize all of this. All of these things, you know, behind the scene. And that's something very, very pertinent, I think, for the work we are doing here.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope it's not depressing, because I love my job. I mean, I genuinely love my job, and I've been very fortunate that whilst I've had some negative comments about what I look like, or things along those lines, I haven't had a sustained period where people are constantly saying those negative things, or making me believe I have a problem going forward. But I do know so many women who have left the field because they have faced those, and I guess it's for them that I did this talk today.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot. Yeah. Leila, you want to say something?
Hi, Pierre. Hi, Faye.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No.
Sorry, I don't have my camera on, but it doesn't matter at all. You may have seen my comment in the chat. Faye, thank you so much. That's very interesting, very important. And just to cheer you up, you know, it's not only STEM, it's absolutely everywhere. I remember my own, you know, experience in top law firms, or my sister experience in top law firm, when her boss, she was a woman, told her when she said she was pregnant, in French, oh merde, which means oh shit, you know, so that's from a woman. When your woman boss, when you say you're pregnant, says oh shit, you know, so that's great. So it happens absolutely everywhere. The problem is that it's not, you know, related to STEM, it's not related to women, but I think fundamentally it's related to a very, very problematic disengagement of the state from public funding. We see that at the university every day, from the NHS, from crash, from all public institutions, so much so that in a number of countries, women cannot work. And we're going back to the situation we had in the 19th century, the sort of stayed-at-home woman. The fact that women could work is simply because in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we had the public facilities, the public support to help women. So that's one. And second, also because societies are so undemocratic or becoming so undemocratic, they welcome this sort of very misogynistic discourse, on what women should do. So we're really going backward. This is appalling. This is pathetic. This being said, we have to support and encourage other women colleagues, not, I think, in the way we're doing it right now, in the way you are doing it, in encourage them to be passionate, to do what they want, to do their field work, to go out there, but certainly not in spending hours. And I've been very much criticized when I said that at the university, but not spending hours filling forms or discussing EDI. It's not about that. It's about empowering, encouraging men and women equally to do what they want and to ignore the comments. I'm very sorry to see that you have, or to hear that you had comments on your persona, how you look and things like that. Just ignore them and look down on them and just be fierce and strong. And that's all we can do, really. But I think we're not helped at all, and we're going backward. We're not helped at all by the current political system, unfortunately.
Yes, thank you, Layla. I agree. I think all we can do is really encourage men and women to look at this, to acknowledge that there is an issue. And I think that acknowledgement goes a long way to solving a lot of those problems, particularly when I'm talking about specifically about field work here. The issues around, toileting and things, if people realize how uncomfortable that makes somebody, hopefully they won't do it, and it all becomes that much easier going forward. So yes, I think trying to, if you're doing something that you're passionate about, please don't get into the mentality that you can't, I think is what I'm trying to get through to people. You can, and there are people out there, there are very good men and women out there to help us.
Very much so. And if you don't mind me saying a few things, because I see Sophie has reacted as well. We had recorded a podcast with Sophie and a few other colleagues on a woman in the blue economy, and what they do. But these women are very often very, very, very strong. Sophie is one of them. You are one of them. And there are ways to overcome this situation. I never see myself as a woman. I see myself as completely neutral. And I've never had, if you wish, I've heard these things, I've encountered these things, but I've never really had these problems directly, because precisely I don't want to be considered as a woman. So I think the sort of emphasis on genders and EDI and all this type of thing is actually extremely detrimental, because it relegates us in a category of inferior, a category of people who are different and inferior implicitly, and we are not. We are equal. So if we had more equality to start with, that would be much better. So that's, I think, very important to say to our young colleagues and the young generation, and then all our colleagues. And there's something, I don't know, Faye, whether you observed that yourself. I think you did, because you alluded to that. I think very often women are women's best enemies, this sort of stigmatization, societal and professional, very often comes from women. You're not a mother, you should be a mother. You're a mother, but you're not a good mother, and so on and so forth. I personally detest when some women colleagues come and say, my name is blah, 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 I'm a mother. Well, I mean, great, you're a mother, that's great, but this is actually not professional. We're not really interested in your private life. So I think there's something which comes from women as well, and this is something as women we have to acknowledge and discuss together, which is not very healthy and probably detrimental to women progression. You might disagree.
No, I agree. That's why I mentioned that the comments are not just from men, particularly the societal side of things, for believing that you can do something and just getting out the door and into the field. A lot of that is actually from females. So it's not about men being the problem. It's a societal problem. It's both genders.
Thank you, Faye.
Thank you, Faye. Sophie, you want to say something, because I see
Thank you, Faye, for your presentation. it's been very interesting to listen to your you know, I have, as you know, I have followed your trip to Antarctica, and it's good to hear for the first time actually your you know, sharing your experience down there. Of course, I agree with a lot of the points that have been raised. And I'm just going to pick on one, is that we as women tend to be our own enemies, and that does happen to me as a sailor, as a researcher. So sometimes the lack of confidence, you know, because you are constantly confronted with challenges. I work in security, so believe me, I'm more than often than not the only female in the room, and you really have to raise to the challenge of making yourself heard, and it's not always easy. But I just wanted to ask you about, or rather share a comment and ask you afterwards, is the strength of networking. I'm a member of a number of networks, women in security, women in strategy, and I have personally found support through these groups and inspiration to go further. So are you part yourself of such groups? Are there any such groups within the university where we as female researchers going out in the field in extreme environments share experiences and support each other?
I am unaware of anything that's specifically for women in fieldwork, and actually it seems like it would be a very sensible thing to do. Generally speaking, it's, you know, word of mouth. It's a lot of these issues are discussed by women to other women, sort of, you know, as whispers. Oh, yeah, while you're there, you might need this, or, you know, don't forget to take this with you, instead of being more open. And perhaps that would be something that would help. I know certainly that in a number of universities they have got a fieldwork, not specifically for women, but, you know, fieldwork networks where a lot of things like such as toileting, etc., can be discussed, you know, openly and without embarrassment, and so that by the time you actually get into the field, everybody understands what is, you know, needs to be done and what is acceptable. But no, I am unaware of any at the university specifically. I mean, in terms of myself, I guess I've just, because I work in that environment, I know a lot of the women who do the, you know, field work and all of these other things, and I've more sort of made my own network that I just, you know, friends and colleagues that we meet up and we chat. But it might be worth, I think, like you say, so perhaps formalizing something like that and inviting particularly ECRs and those to join in, so that they can have those discussions and some benefit from you know, our experiences.
I think you're right there, and yes, or maybe we can discuss this later, but there's definitely a case for me for this kind of networking, and yeah, I'd like to explore that. Thank you, Faye.
I do think there's a space for particularly women only for some of the issues that might be embarrassing for some people in mixed gender groups, but I do also think that it's important that, like I said, a lot of the other things that are societal are discussed with both men and women. So it, you know, it might be that there's two separate things there.
Agreed.
Thank you, Faye. Do we have any question in the chat?
I think we have a lots of fascinating comments in the chat, which, you know, I'm just thinking about how to get them together to add in the, you know, at the end of the seminar as well. But we don't have any questions, but we still have time. If anybody wants to ask, please can you raise your hand?
I can see one from Holly from CFAS, who's talking about having pregnancies during postdocs. So if Holly, if you don't mind, I'll read out what you've written so others can see it. Having a baby during postdoc can be detrimental to the project program. So we really need to look at how programs are funded, then blaming people for being frustrated. I agree, and there are. And I think this is the problem, is that there actually are a lot of funded things. This happened while I was on my first maternity leave. I was a postdoc, and NERC had in place, it's not properly funded. it's not like for like was one of the problems, and it doesn't allow for, you know, extension of the project, etc. So there are issues with the funding model. There are funding models there, but it is yeah, I think it comes down to the frustration that the person who knows the most, if you're the postdoc, you know the most about the project, will be taking time off. That could easily be overcome with proper handover, but that never happens. I don't know if you work at CFAS, I don't know how that works there, but I know certainly in the academic field, handover is just something that does not happen. It takes so long to recruit somebody to post, and to go through all the paperwork, etc., and everything, that by the time you've got somebody in, there's absolutely, the other child would probably be in high school. So it can be problematic to do that. But I do agree, obviously, ensuring that people that people understand that if you employ a woman and she does become pregnant and she goes away, it won't be detrimental to the project by having it properly funded, is of course the correct way to go. But there are also issues around maternity leave and how long you have when you come back, and the length of the project, which I think are really, really difficult to overcome. Oh, there you go. So I replied, she left academia to start the family because it's easier. And I agree. I very nearly went to CFAS myself for exactly the same reason. As it happened, I managed to get a permanent position in academia, but it again is definitely a way that women are lost from not STEM and very much the fieldwork side of things.
Thanks a lot, Faye, and thanks a lot. I mean, I'm trying to read all the things in the chat, but too many. So I think you will send that to Faye. You know, she will work on that. You know, for the next until the end of the month to provide comments on all of this. So that's your homework, Faye.
Oh, that's my homework. Okay, I did not know I got homework from the door.
Yeah, on the top of looking after the kids. You know, don't forget the kids, huh? Well, it was very, very. I mean, I really enjoy it. Because it's not that I discover things, but I realize things that we just simply ignore, you know, when most of the time when we are in the field. Yeah. So even if we try to do our best, you know, there are many things that we just don't take into account. Yeah. So thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot for the Horizon series. So which one is the next one?
Well, thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Faye. Thanks for the great session. So our next Blue Horizon seminar will be chaired by Professor Leila Chacon. It'll be on human trafficking at sea. So stay tuned, and we'll post all the information on the X right now and via our newsletter. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you in October.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.